Hey folks, Loremaster of Sotek here, and we're back with the Heroes of Legend proposal. I know it's been a little bit, but a bunch of stuff's been coming up, and I do want to get through this playlist of at least having one character for every single faction. That way I can tie it up nice and neat in a playlist bow and ship it off to Reddit and some other places. So let's get back on track. Once again, I do want to quickly note that kind of the rules for this series, or the ultimate purpose, is to introduce all of you to a couple of characters who would satisfy the role of being a legendary hero. That means, notably, they need to be available to every playable faction of the race they represent. So, no Bogret Facebeater for Greenskins, or Ska Bloodtail for Skaven, or Duffskull the Shaman for Greenskins, because those are tied to a single individual lord. They wouldn't really work as a character for all the Greenskins, for instance. Like, Bogret Facebeater is just for Grimgor Ironhide. It's not for, everybody else. So we're only focusing on characters that everybody would be able to play with. Because the big thing is that these would be characters you would pay for to be included in that little DLC Heroes of Legend pack. So hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, last episode, we explored those among the countless greenskins found across the world for a few good champions. But now a cold wind blows from the distant north. Who might answer the call for the Chaos Worshippers of Norsca? While for most of the factions we'll be covering in the series, well, up at least until this point, I have two candidates competing for the role of legendary hero. Some of these, Norsca being one of them, are going to be a unique exception and have only one character. But at minimum, every race will get one proposal, but some will have two. Basically, is what I'm saying. And this just has to do with some of the character rosters in the game have already gotten most of their characters in, or they're a really hyper-focused roster, so they don't have as much leeway on looking for a new character. But, that being said, I have the perfect character for each of these guys. And when it comes to those who might defy the will of the Norscan tribes, may I introduce you to Syla Anfringrim, the Talon of Khorne. In the harsh lands of Norsca, there have been many noteworthy and incredible champions to rise in the name of the Dark Gods, but none have ever matched the meteoric rise of Syla from the Ironpelt tribe. As a mere teenager, he grew to great fame as he brutally slaughtered the other tribes who lived in the neighboring fjords, marking him out for greatness in the eyes of his tribe. Over the next 10 years, he would go on to accomplish a staggering number of feats in the name of the Blood God, such as slaying the Jabberslite that lived near the river Voltag, or dealing the death blow to the tentacled monstrosity that terrorized the Bay of Blades. Every year he would sail out as the lord of a marauding horde, hell-bent on seeking loot and glory in the name of the Dark Gods. The Empire, Bretonia, Nehekara, and even the distant lands of End felt his wrath. It was Khorne who would finally notice this great champion and bless him with a series of gifts. For slaughtering the Skaven of the Black Gulch until the chasm ran with rivers of blood, Anfingrim received immense strength and hulking ape-like arms. For raiding the Ward Owls of the Penipotent Ibn Dul and personally smashing the flagship of the Duli fleet to splinters, Khorne gifted Syla with a serpentine tail ending with a snapping maw. When the Scourgeborn, as he's known, brutally massacred the Chaos Dwarf delegation that had arrived to trade with his tribe, the Lord of Skulls blessed him with horn-like plates that sprouted out from all across his body. Finally, before his 20th year in service to the Dark Gods, Syla Anfringrim crushed the hungering gorgers found beneath the Undermountain and received the mind of a ravenous beast for his reward. On that night, the corruption became too much, and the warrior's body spasmed as it was racked with mutation, until at last his transformation into a chaos spawn was complete. Now reduced to a mindless beast, he exists more as a glorified warhound, as opposed to the mighty warlord he once was. All that awaits the Talon of Khorne is a lifetime of brutal slaughter until one day he meets his eventual death. That wraps up the lore portion for the video. So let's address how the Norsca faction could potentially acquire the Scourgeborn. I think the most suitable way to unlock him as a legendary hero would be either to sacrifice defeated enemy armies 5 times, or perhaps once the faction leader reaches a high enough rank, the Iron Pelt tribe could spawn in Norsca as an army or side faction that you have to defeat in battle. And if you do so, you acquire Syla Anfengrim as your legendary hero. When it comes to skills and abilities, I'm sure it will surprise absolutely no one that Syla specializes in just tearing into combat while screaming "kill for Khorne" over and over again. His entire gimmick revolves around just charging forward and slaughtering anything that gets too close. The Talon of Khorne should of course have a terrifying amount of melee attack and be balanced around taking out units instead of single entities when it comes to figuring out his attack animations and splash damage ratios and all that technical stuff. His damage should be a very healthy balance between armor piercing and regular, resulting in an above average damage stat for a monstrous infantry-sized character. On the defensive side of things, Syla has several mutations which have bolstered his survivability, including Scaly Skin, a Brass Collar of Khorne, and the Mark of Khorne. Scaly Skin is a common upgrade, and in Total War Warhammer, it's usually represented by increased missile resistance and a slightly higher armor stat, which I think would be suitable. For Anfengrim, I imagine him having roughly 50-ish armor, but he should be rocking at minimum a 30% missile resistance between his mutations and the natural missile resistance you get for being a character. But that should be the minimum. I'd be more than happy to see it go higher, so he just doesn't get mowed down by archers. Next is the Brass Collar, which could function more like an item and grant the Scourgeborn an active ability which for a fairly long period of time should grant him massive magic resistance and a tiny bit of physical resistance. I'm thinking along the lines of like 70 to 80% magical resistance and maybe 5 to 10 physical resistance. Then, perhaps the Brass Collar could only lower the cooldown so long as Syla is in combat. That way it's not just making him completely ridiculous. Finally, the Mark of Khorne just means that he has Frenzy. Most of those would probably be locked behind a skill point or, something like that in campaign, though I could see like the Brass Collar being something you get at the onset. But for multiplayer, that's how I would see them kind of working. Of course, being a Norscan character, I would note that instead of getting Berserk, which is the basic ability that all Norscan infantry have, I think that Syla should come with Rage, which is the superior version that I think a couple of the Regiments of Renown have. Finally, and most importantly, being a Chaos spawn, of course Syla Anfengrim should be completely unbreakable, just standard. For weaknesses, the Talon of Khorne is very much a Berserker type character, and as such is quite lacking in the raw defense department. While his Scaly Skin and Brass Collar of Khorne do afford some various resistances, Syla is still quite vulnerable due to his low armor. I would also expect that he'd have a relatively poor melee defense stat, as the mindless beast he has become cares not for self-preservation. So any sustained damage, especially anti-large damage in close combat from like halberds or spears, should easily be able to put down the Scourgeborn if he becomes isolated from friendly units. On the campaign map, it would make the most sense for Syla to just focus heavily on dealing tons of damage to enemy armies if used as an agent. So a focus on assault units, assault garrison, and assassination. For the army he joins, I would say a bonus to campaign movement would be a very cool skill for him to provide, as the Chaos Spawn inspires the Norscans to push forward recklessly to spill more blood for the Hound. Other unique skills I could see Syla having would perhaps be various Blessings of Khorne that he would be able to, put a skill point in and it would apply to his entire army. Maybe he could give all the Norscan infantry in his army Frenzy, or maybe he could upgrade his entire army to have the Norscan Rage passive instead of the Berserk, I think Rage is the big one. So instead of having Berserk, upgrade them all to have Rage. That could be pretty sick. Maybe a different blessing could give the entire army magic resistance as well. Just reap all the terrible bounty gifted by Khorne as you draw the attention of the Lord of Skulls. Finally, when it comes to designing the visuals for Syla, he's one of the very fortunate characters that has beautiful artwork in addition to a pretty well-made tabletop model, so just use that. I do hope there'd be a animation where his tail mouth just like either attacks behind him or just like snaps up some infantry guy, just eats his face or something, though. I will note that. In any event, that's going to do us for the Norscan legendary hero. Please let me know what you think of this character as a proposal down below. Would you pay for him to be part of a Heroes of Legend pack to either use in your Wulfric or Throg campaign? And do you like Syla? I mean, personally, I like Syla because he's even a Norscan-born character, too. He fits perfectly. But if you don't like him as a pick, then who would you have instead? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching, guys.